Do diamonds on me, go flash this ain't slang chain. Cause I didn't get my baby mama that do intake.
What's good? Hola, hola. This is your boy Tico Tren, aka Tico Tren Red Pill, aka the Internal Sadist. This video is going to be about groupthink. Yeah, I'm doing a video at like what 3 in the morning California time, 6 in the morning New York Standard Time and shit like that. I'm doing shit like that because I can. But yeah, nonetheless, this video is going to be about groupthink. The cold reality of groupthink is it affects everybody on every level, no matter how you look at it or cut it. It's one of those things where if you let it go long enough, it will affect a lot of things that you do in life or do in general for all intents and purposes. The overall problem with groupthink is when you get a bunch of people and they start thinking a certain way or believing a certain thing, they typically end up they typically end up just just not really understanding what they're in or how they're perceived or what is it about them that actually gives them the groupthink mentality because they think because they're following one person it's like, oh no, this person said this over here. Well, yeah, you have groupthink. And the sad part about that, a lot of people fall into this category when it comes to groupthink. If you look at the thumbnail on this video, you would understand the whole entire thing with groupthink. Like, even if somebody thinks it's a bad idea, just so they can be just so they can be agreeable, they'll pretty much go along with it. Or just for appeasement purposes, or if they're followers or they have a herding mentality or herd mentality, or if you know what I mean. So typically, a lot of people end up with a herd mentality. Um, what that means is there's a lot of people who will just follow people blindly into shit no matter what they do, no matter what they say, even if it's to their own detriment, they will follow a person into the thing blindly. It's one thing if you're following somebody that inspires you or somebody that has your best interest at heart into something like that. It's another thing if you're following somebody on a wing of prayer or a hope, basically. Like if that person doesn't really inspire you and they're not really a great leader, you shouldn't want to follow that person wholeheartedly. It kind of sort of goes back to the old adage: if your friends all jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge with them? That's typically how it works. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of people in society who don't seem to understand or seem to get the concept of why it is you have groupthink and why the hell are you following people. And the sad part about that is a lot of the times the people who actually follow other people are nothing more than beta betas and stuff like that, are people who don't really fit in with this society or people who are outcast, things like that. But then there's also a lot of people who believe they're smart who fall for the okey doke because the person is charismatic or the person is this is typically how you end up with like a cult like mentality, because a lot of the times a lot of the people end up a lot of the smartest people in the world end up in cults. um so it's one of those things where like you have to take in consideration a lot of the stuff that you have to take in consideration a lot of the stuff that that you're going to that is coming at you fast, or that is that is that kind of sort of bothers you or follows you for all intents purposes. So it ends up being one of those things where you have to understand you have to understand what you're in, and how you have to understand the peril or the mindset of the person who's trying to drag you in or make you who they want you to be for all intents purposes. The sad part about that is when it comes down to it, what a lot of people don't seem to understand is like what it's kind of like with men with women. If she has a good smile and a big butt, he's pretty much hooked. The same thing goes for a lot of people who fall into cults and stuff like that. They typically are hooked by the smile and the charm and the alluring and the surety of the person. This is typically why cult leaders can get away with doing random shit to women and other people. Um, what's up, Baron Yam? What's up, meatbags? At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you have to realize, you have to be very aware and self-aware of the situation that you're getting yourself into. Because if you don't, you'll land yourself in a peculiar situation where your life's at peril, or you're doing stuff that would be questionable to your dignity or your morality for all intents purposes when you start following certain people. Because I've always said, like, if you're going to follow me, I want you to follow me based on if you're willing to do it, and or your morality for all intents purposes, for morality's sakes. Don't go following me because it sounds like a cool idea to do, or you know, and it just seems like it just might be cool to do. Never do that, because then you'll get yourself into an incident or a situation where random shit. You'll get yourself into a situation where you don't seem to understand, or you don't seem to get, or you don't seem to comprehend the the overall diagram and or situation that you're actually in. So it's always good to have situational awareness and always keep your wits about you when you go into things. Because the sad part about that, like I said, a lot of people actually end up being sucked into a lot of this stuff. What's up, successful endeavors? A lot of people end up sucked into this stuff, and it's sad. And it's like some of the smartest people get sucked into this stuff all because somebody thought it might be a great idea. So what ends up happening is, let's just say, best case scenario, the person ends up sucked into the cult. They go with the cult, they go with everything, and they start realizing things are off, and then like all of a sudden, somebody comes in and saves them, and then they realize that they don't understand how they were sucked up into the whole entire lore and everything, and they end up out the cult, but they end up like somewhat, still shaken and bothered by what they went through. On top of that, they have a very low self-esteem, or I mean, a very low opinion of themselves for being tricked into something like this in the first place. Is typically how a lot of this works. So you end up with successful endeavors is a trip. But yeah, it's one of those things where you have to basically understand the gravity on what you're getting yourself into, or you have to understand the context and or implications of what you're getting yourself into to be willing to go along with a lot of the stuff that the person is going to do or do to you for all intents purposes, or for you. Because a good example of that is women always think they're great, and you know they're the moral compass, but they're the first ones to get sucked up into a cult. And then on top of that, they're the first ones to be okay with sharing the same man within that cult. And then on top of that, they're the same group of people who are okay with sharing their kids with this same man for sexual favors also. So it makes for a very funny thing, because at the end of the day, women are pretty agreeable. Women want everybody to like them no matter what's going on. So typically women are willing to go further than most men to actually to appease everybody, or get everybody to like them for all intents purposes. Women are willing to even show nudes so they could be appreciated, or or admired, or for people to like them. Women are willing as far as to go to have sex with a man just so he can like her, or you know he can be seen as good in her eyes for all intents purposes, even though it's for the wrong reasons. So you run into a lot of people who will fall for the okie doke. Best is the best way I can describe it to you. So the pitfalls of groupthink would be the pitfalls of groupthink are more so the ability for you to conform and or be sucked into doing stupid shit or getting sucked up into a group. Um, like Successful Endeavor said, don't drink the Kool-Aid. The sad part about that is typically how it works where people get sucked. Well, the pitfalls of it altogether is you end up in a group, you end up doing bad things, you end up doing things that are morally wrong or morally irreprehensible. Dang, I hate when I have to say words like that in English because my English sucks when it comes to words like that. But yeah, but typically what happens is when you get yourself into these messes or you get yourself into these quandaries or conundrums, you typically realize that you're in a mess and you're trying to figure out how to get yourself out of it. And most times, people are too far in to be able to pull themselves out, or they're too far in to be able to make a reverse, or they're too far gone mentally, or they've pretty much like Successful Endeavor's dad said, pretty much unlike what Successful Endeavors said, drink the Kool-Aid to the point where like now they're hooked and now they're in. And the sad part about that is now this person is beholden to these groups or to a person or to their leader, if you will, of that group or to the stuff like that. Whereas the women in a group are pretty much agreeable or do it for appeasement or they're very agreeable, so they'll join the group, just so somebody can like them, and they're willing to do the craziest stuff just to be liked or for appeasement in the group, just to be, yeah, just for appeasement or just for agreeability, for agreeability's sake, still willing to actually go as far to join the groups. The sad part about that is if you own a cult, if you bring women, it's basically like how I talk about the bar stacking when it comes to stacking a bar. Uh, first you do the advertising, then you bring in some guys, then you bring in some women, then you bring in more guys, then you bring in women, then you bring in more guys, then you bring in women, then you bring in more guys, then you bring in women, then you bring in the guys with the cars, then more women just show the hell up because guys with cars are here. Come on now. Guys with nice cars and bikes are here. So women are naturally going to show up based on the stacking principle of the bar. Women, guys, women, guys, women, guys, women, guys, basically. So it's one of those things. Yeah, I've seen that one. I've seen that. I've seen that successful. But yeah, typically what happens with that is you typically run into a problem with you typically run after people do that. You typically run into a problem where the people involved typically end up like doing, like I said, a morally reprehensible thing. The women are doing immoral things, and the sad part about that are women are easily to take women. You can take advantage of women very easily via mental manipulation and or persuasion for all intents purposes. They're typically going to be the first ones to fall when you're trying to get a group of people on board. Women are always going to be the first to fall. If you can get the women, you can pretty much get the men for all intents purposes, because at the end of the day, if a woman goes, then men will follow. Because that white knightness and that cuckness or that simpness, basically their inner simpness Everdeen basically shines through, so they got to go follow. And then you got the white knights that basically got to ride in on the horses to try to be Captain Save-A-Ho. And you got the cucks that pretty much let a woman walk all over them and let a woman cheat on them and still take her back or beg her to stay type shit. So typically you got those groups of people who will follow naturally. Then you got like the regular people wondering what's going on over there because all the women are over there. So they naturally would come based on curiosity and things like that. So you end up just stacking people in this cult based on the fact that you got women, and then now you got the white knights, the cucks, and the simps, and now you got like more women wondering what's going on with these guys over here, and then you got more guys wondering what's going on with these women that just walk that way. So it's like that's basically how cults end up being stacked properly. They basically have the same concept of the bar stacking, like I always talk about. So the problem with it is the problem with it is when you get sucked in a group think, you don't really think for yourself. Your 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 rationale, your morality, your your everything about it is gone. Let it be a cult or let it be you just following somebody blindly, all because they said something that resonated with you just once. It's kind of like what Cypher said in a live stream one time. Um, when it comes to intelligent people, an intelligent person might say something smart once a week or once a month, whereas a dumb person will just spit shit out hoping it sticks. And that's typically what cult leaders do. And they're very good at manipulation. They're not the most intelligent, but they're very good at manipulation and persuasion or grifting, or not even just grifting, or like, just manipulation and persuasion. And they're able to play and tap into your inner carnal desires or your insecurities to actually get you to capitulate and or be for appeasement, or to be agreeable for all intents and purposes too. So when it comes down to it, it's not even just cult leaders, it's just people that you follow. We've seen people on YouTube who follow people blindly and believe that what they say is gospel or the truth, like they're the second coming of Christ or something like that. And it's very sad when you actually see it happen, because these people claim to be smart but and independent, but what they don't realize is they don't fell into the trap of groupthink, and they're following this person blindly, never really questioning the person. And you typically see it on a lot of streams, if you ever notice, where people are like, yeah, 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 and this, that, and the other, and yeah. And it's like there's no rationale on why they're doing that. Nobody's questioning why the person is doing it. Nobody's even remotely questioning the person on what they mean by it or anything. They just believe it wholeheartedly. And the sad part about that is half the time the people don't even understand what the person is talking about, or a whole entire concept of what the person is talking about. And the person never has to elaborate because everybody didn't drink the Kool-Aid. So now they're following this person. It's typically how it works. It's sad, but it's true. It's the nature of the beast. Humans are pretty easily manipulated, and like the sad part about that, if a man's lonely, he's more likely to join something based on a fact because he's lonely and he feels left out or he feels like an outcast. Is typically how it works. So when ends up happening is you change your whole entire way of life, you change your whole entire perception, you change your whole entire way of thinking. Your morality gets dropped, your inhibitions get dropped, your everything that you normally had in place that made you who you are pretty much all disappears, and you go to following that person wholeheartedly, never questioning the person, never once asking a question to the person, and just believing everything the person says. And the sad part about that is 9 times out of 10, if you were to ask that person a question, that's where the breakdown actually breaks down, or that's when the breakdown actually happens. Because the sad part about that is I'm willing to bet you any money 9 out of 10 times that person can't elaborate on why they have you doing it, or they'll come up with some ridiculous reason, tinfoil hat reason on why you should do this, or why you should believe this, or why you should follow them. They can never elaborate on their talking points. They just have those talking points because they borrowed it from other people. It's kind of like the one dude in the one stream who literally said he was a molecular geneticist, basically, when in fact he really wasn't. Because I'm actually a molecular genetics. I actually do molecular genetics, and I know he didn't do molecular genetics based on what was said to me and PMs about the person, and they lack the ability to actually conceptualize what they were saying. And then on top of that, when a person who didn't even know anything about molecular genetics actually brought up something that was on the topic of molecular genetics to that person, the person basically was stumped and befuddled for all intents and purposes. And I found it funny how that worked. And it's one of those things where like a guy that knew nothing about it literally stumped this guy in a stream, and it's like, well, I thought you knew about molecular genetics. And the sad part about that, he didn't. And the sad part about that is these people are willing to follow that person so blindly that no matter what happens, they're willing to make up they're willing to make up elaborate things about themselves to actually say that they're this person if the person puts them on the spot and says they're this person. So if the person, like, all of a sudden now you're an astrophysicist, or you're a aeronautics engineer, or you're a jet propulsion something, basically, all because this person gave you this title, basically. Meanwhile, you're none of this stuff, and it's sad. So what happens is you end up being manipulated into believing that you can do something that you have no skill in doing, or you have no knowledge in, or things that you can probably, somewhat brush up on if you actually, take the time to do to remotely fake like you're intelligent. But the sad part about that is, if you're following somebody who's in a cult, or somebody with a cult like mentality who wants to be a cult leader, you typically don't really think for yourself. So you won't think to actually look up stuff so you can somewhat sound intelligent and or smart on the topic that you're supposed to be a specialist in. And that's typically how a lot of this stuff works, because people get put up to various crazy things for no reason whatsoever, knowing damn well they know nothing about it, knowing that there can always be a backlash or a backlash to what they're doing or saying for all intents and purposes. So it ends up being one of those things where, like successful endeavors said, where they once the, yeah, basically you follow, they've the value, they have a distorted value of themselves, or they become something that they're not, based on what their leader or masters actually say, because they've been manipulated into believing that they're this thing. So now all of a sudden they believe that they're this. And the sad part about that, what I've noticed about a lot of people who follow these people, they typically are easily swayed or manipulated into believing certain things, to the point where, like, they're willing to go wholeheartedly and follow this guy into hell, despite the fact that they have none of this knowledge and nobody else around them has any of this knowledge. Like, I remember I was listening to a guy in a stream once who was in a an Arabic stream with me, and he was talking about how 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 alluring that whole entire subsection group is, by making it believable or telling the truth, when in fact, he goes, I know it's full of shit, but they're so believable and nobody's ever been able to argue their points away. The sad part about that is, what he doesn't realize is, their points are from the PUA community, their points are from the red pill community, and their points are from the MGTOW community. So therefore, we're the ones who invented those arguments and or talking points. Therefore, we know how to destroy those talking points at the end of the day. You can't sit up here and tell me that something a quote that I invented, or a concept that I invented, can't be argued away, when in fact I'm the one who invented it. I'm basically like the government. I'm not going to come up with something unless I can come up with a counter argument to it. In other words, I'm not going to come up with a disease if I don't have a cure for it, for all intents and purposes. That's typically how that works. You basically want the cure for it before you let it loose. That way people can pay you. Capitalism 101. Um, so I never actually come up with a quote or anything I say that I can't destroy myself, or somebody like-minded and or a little bit more intelligent can actually destroy themselves, based on the argument and how it's actually worded. Typically, people can pick it apart unless it has some type of race in it, and a person's a white person. They typically tend to stay away from any argument that has race in it or any type of thing in it, just for good measures, so they can protect themselves and their image. It's typically how it works. So you'll end up with a lot of people that typically don't really believe what's going on, but will follow it wholeheartedly because appeasement and agreeableness, or because it sounds nice. Or another thing that'll happen with a lot of these groups, that's is a fallout or downfall to these groups, basically, or pitfalls to these groups, is a lot of times, to get for these groups to remotely be successful, they'll mentally, emotionally, they'll mentally and emotionally destroy you, basically. So you get so they can make it seem as though you need them. Um, and the sad part about what ends up happening with that is, you end up with a group of people who are so destroyed that they literally believe that they need this group of people because nobody else can cure them besides the people who destroyed them emotionally and mentally. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, if you had a bit more mental fortitude, this would have never happened to you in the first place. And typically you would be able to overcome it or you'd be able to overcome it and or be able to make it work basically, or be able to shake it off. Because the sad part about that, they come at you in all shapes or forms and all angles to try to manipulate you both mentally and emotionally. Then they try to pick at you your emotions and your sense, not your self your self-esteem and your self-worth basically, to basically be able to destroy you and get you to do what you want to do. What's up, Black Pill Red Pill Philosophy? Black Real Pill Philosophy, what's up, brother? Hola, primo. um so what ends up happening with these people is they're emotionally destroyed, they're emotionally distraught, and they're emotionally fucked up to the point where, like, you get somebody like a Dippin who is so fucked up and so destroyed that now he believes that that's the only people that can save him from his miserable existence. Sad part about that is, like I said in one live stream, all he has to do is go back home and he's perfectly fine. Sad part about that is his family is going to be disappointed in him no matter what he does until he comes back home and accepts his fate that he's going to be married off. And that's typically how it works. Because the sad part about that, reason how I know that is because my great grandmother was a Santal woman. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, my family actually does arranged marriages. If you can't find, that's usually the backup plan to you not being able to find a partner. Do arrange marriages for you for all intents purposes. If you can't find a decent partner or a partner, to love, don't have they have somebody on speed dial that you can be married off to in my family. Let it be man or woman, they have somebody for you. And it's kind of funny how that works when it comes to my family because they're always on point with stuff like that. So typically, what ends up happening, yeah, don't get me wrong, they PUAs are cult like. However, PUAs actually have some results, unlike some other group of people. PUAs do present some results to what they're placing in front of you versus other people. At least with PUA, unless you paid a shit ton of money, at least with PUAs, you can actually have some something to walk away from or something to show for it is the best way I could put it for you to you. I'm not 100% fan of PUAs, but at the end of the day, there's at least something to show for it once it's all said and done. Unlike other groups of people, there's nothing to show for it, or there's nothing there, and they want you to believe some concept because believe. Um, it's typically how it works. I'm not saying it's the best idea, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you're being manipulated and tricked into something that you don't need to be in or be a part of in the first damn place. The sad part about that is what a lot of people don't know or understand about that is now that you're tricked into believing this stuff, what can they get you to do next? How much can they get you to sacrifice? What can they get you to sacrifice on top of that? So this ends up being one of the pitfalls. Like a good example of that, if you went in with children, let's just say you went in, you have 5 children, you have 2 girls, 5 boys. We'll say that the cult leader says that it's only right that you hand over your daughters to him, because he's your cult leader and it's the right thing to do. Now the sad part about that, any rational thinking man would be like, hell no, my daughters. But anybody who's drank the Kool-Aid won't be able to think for themselves and or be able to have the wits about them to actually have the self the self conversation with, I mean, the internal conversation with themselves to actually justify why they're actually handing over their daughters to some ridiculous man for some crazy acts. Or another good example of that is building up enough money to travel to a certain country just so you can bang prostitutes is another good example of that. Um, so it ends up being one of those things where you have to be able to understand what you're getting yourself into, and why are you traveling to this country with a bunch of other people to share a prostitute, or why is it that that you're so wholeheartedly or so involved in doing this, or have this faith in doing this, or this person to do so. um why do you have this much faith in this person to do so, and just hand over the rights to your children, and or your bodily rights, or your wife's bodily rights, or your another female family member's bodily rights to this person to do what they wish with. So it ends up being one of those things where, like, there's a morality breakdown, and there's a character breakdown, basically, where they break you down, like Successful Endeavor said, and rebuild you back up. Or in some cases, you can refer to it as grooming a person, or destroying. Like, basically, it'd be like the military. They destroy you and they rebuild you in the image that they need you to be in, for all intents and purposes. It's typically what a lot of cults do. They'll destroy you and rebuild you in the image that they need you to be in, or they want you to be in, or where they need you to be. And the sad part about that is, a nice way to do that is love bombing somebody, or a nice way to do that is, um, wagging your finger at a person. So there's two opposite ends that you can usually literally use to do so. You could do the finger wag at the person for, like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, finger wag at a person, or you could turn around and do the what's it called? You could turn around and do the shoot, or like the love bombing, where you make people feel good about the stupid decision that they make. Basically, it's okay, buddy, it's okay. We're here for you. We love you. It's basically like equivalent to if you ever went to an AA meeting, or an NA meeting, basically, where they love bomb you. Hi, such and such. We're here for you. And it's basically that's basically the premise of it. So you get hooked on wanting to go back to this thing because you feel good, because you feel as though people actually care about you, when in fact they're just there to say that, and that's all they say basically the whole entire meeting. Hi, such and such, we're here for you. So it's one of those things where, you're basically being mentally manipulated into feeling good, or that dopamine rush that you're getting, to actually want to actually feel this over and over again. So now they destroyed you. Now they're feeding you these dopamine rushes. It's typically how it works. So now you're starting to feel good about yourself. You're starting to feel confident. Meanwhile, it's too late. You're already trapped and you're in a cult, or you're following a group of people that you don't need to be following, or you follow a person wholeheartedly doing dumb shit that you know is wrong, but you still follow them anyway because they're your fearless leader. So it's one of those things where it's like, you have to ask yourself, are you following this person because it's right? Or are you following this person because, you know, he said so, or she said so, he said so, or whatever it is under the sun. So it's one of those things where you got to actually take a look within yourself and have that internal argument with yourself, or that internal struggle about, is this right or wrong? Am I doing this for right reasons, or am I doing this for the wrong reasons? And this is typically where the voice inside you will basically be able to shine, if you actually still have that voice inside you, to avoid to pretty much, so you can avoid getting yourself further into it. The sad part about that is, because you feel so good, you're more willing to actually go forth instead of step back and actually think about it. Because the sad part about that, when you start stepping back, you get shunned, or you get the finger wag at you, or you'll get guilted into coming back, for all intents and purposes, or you'll get guilt, and they'll basically make it so that you end up needing them mentally, physically, and emotionally to make your decisions for you. And the sad part about that, when that happens, is we actually see it unfold all the time in live streams with people. When, like, because I always found it funny how they say, well, Tico's stream is an echo chamber. No, it's not. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody argues their point against me. It's just the fact that I just happen to come up with a better argument at the time for everybody to be like, well, okay, yeah, I can see how that happens, or that works. that just happens to be one of those things. Or some, like a good example, I'll come up with an idea and somebody will say something to me, then I'll incorporate that idea into the idea so I can explain it better to them on why it will or on why it won't work for all intents and purposes. So it's not an echo chamber. It's me basically using that idea that they gave me. That's a good idea, using it, and then playing devil's advocate with it. So typically, none of my streams are actually echo chambers, whereas people like this streams are echo chambers because somebody always got a disagreement or somebody always is bothered by something that I'm always saying or posting. So it makes for a very interesting dynamic at the end of the day once it's all said and done. Um, Unlike other streams where everybody's like, "Well, yeah, you should listen to him. He's right," and like, dude, why are you listening to this guy? He's wrong. He destroyed your life. Why are you listening to a guy whom destroyed your life? Help me make sense of that, pimpin'. Help me make sense of that. And the sad part about that is successful endeavors is a trip. I'm here for you, Tico. Hi, Tico, I'm here for you. He's a trip. But yeah, and like you said, they basically rebuilt the person to suit their needs for the group. So the sad part about that, you might not even be good in that skill. So now you're being rebuilt to believe that you have this skill now. Good example is molecular genetics. Or another good example is you used to be a farmer. Now you're the pastor, or now you're the security guard, or now you're the second in command for some shit that you didn't know you were even the second in command for. So basically, you get destroyed and rebuilt for the needs of the group or cult for all intents and purposes. Um, and it's true, Gam. 7 hours of destroying your life is highly unproductive. Another good example of cult-like behaviors that I've noticed going on in live streams, or group think behaviors going on in live streams, is the phenomena where you'll get together a panel just so you can talk shit on one person because you're too scared to do it by your damn self, or you're too passive aggressive to do it by your damn self. And that's like a phenomenon with a lot of these younger content creators. I'm not going to say no names. We all know who I'm talking about. Younger content creators, and even other content creators, where you have to basically get together. Or actually, multiple content creators I'm actually talking about right now, where you need to get together as a panel and talk shit on one person or two people. So you basically need about 5, 6, 7 people so you can talk shit on one or two people. Like, in what world does that actually make sense? And why would you spend this much time trying to destroy a certain human being in a stream for that long? That is very counterproductive. The sad part about that, what they're actually trying to do is break down the concept. They're trying to break down your concept, and they basically need all those people so they could try to jump you or dogpile you into submitting to them for all intents and purposes. Typically how it works. So they got all those people on one stream to talk shit on you, to dogpile on you, or to jump you into what they believe, or jump you into. It's basically like being jumped into a gang for all intents and purposes. Initiation, being jumped into a gang. It's typically how it works. So basically, they'll either do the jump in on you, or it'll do the dog pile on you. That's typically how it works. They basically want you to, forfeit your train of thought or your beliefs basically to them, and submit to what they believe and what they got going on. And the sad part about that is when you have to actually bring a group of people together to do so, you end up being not really all that effective, or you just end up being stupid. Basically, what you did was basically get somebody to give up and follow you, and you really don't have a message, or get somebody to follow you, and now you're working off of a message that you stole from somebody else, or a talking point that you've taken from other people so you can make yourself feel better about yourself or make yourself seem smart. Or a good example of that is a good example on how they actually get people to do shit, because I've actually talked about this multiple times. They'll take other people's talking points. But the sad part about that is they can't elaborate themselves on those same talking points, which is very sad. Like, once you think about it, if you have this talking point, you should be able to argue that same talking point or elaborate on that talking point or argue to defend that talking point. If you can't, then where did you borrow this from? It's basically the same thing that feminists do, where they bring up talking points, but they have no source or no backing to back it or argue it, or they don't know how to argue their point to the point where now they believe that this is this what it is, but it's really not. So they basically just use ad hominems and straw mans and or what they refer to as um uh so what ends up happening with that is you end up um you end up believing a certain thing that you really don't need to believe, or you just end up capitulating, or you're following a person who really can't elaborate. Because I've always said, look, if somebody's going to try to get you to believe some shit, question them. If they can't elaborate on it or argue why it's a good idea, then they're full of shit. Because the sad part about that, what they'll basically come at you with is a bunch of other filler words, or they'll say a bunch of buzzwords to basically make you feel a certain way. It's typically how it works next, because they can't really argue the point, so they basically use a bunch of buzzwords, or they try to pick apart your self esteem, or you emotionally, or mentally. Basically, they try to pick you apart. That way, they can make you an easy target. The sad part about that is you can never be an easy target for somebody who sucks who sucks at picking you apart, and they need a group of people to do so. So in a way, you end up being better than them, or they don't seem to understand the concept of anything for all intents and purposes. But and they think that, and the sad part about that, when they think they always beat you, and they think they always got you, basically based on one-sided information. Because the sad part about that, even if you're making good points to these people, they don't listen to your points. They basically shoot it down, even if you have a logical explanation behind it, and there's zero logic behind theirs. Everybody's riding wholeheartedly with the zero logic behind theirs, or the zero argument behind theirs. And that's typically all you really have to do, is make them argue their points. Is it a talking point, or is it their own personal belief? This is typically what I talk about when it comes to people who believe a certain thing. I'll don't care if you believe a certain thing, but if you believe it because somebody else told you it or said something to you, then that's one thing. If you believe it because you believe it wholeheartedly, you have an argument to back it up, and you believe in it 100%, and you got convictions and beliefs, and you got your own train of thought on the idea of it, I'll back you 100%. I may not agree with you, but I'll back you 100% on it. It's typically how I operate, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you end up you end up you know falling for an okie doke at that point. So the sad part about that is, if you're going to drag people into an echo chamber to jump them, then you're full of shit, and any you really don't have any points or any way to argue anything in the first damn place. Because the sad part about that is, if you were able to actually argue your points, you wouldn't need several people around you to do so. You would not need several people around you to do so. It's the cold truth. Like, why do you need this many people to talk pal one person? Or why do you need this many people to jump this person? Oh, gang mentality. Gotcha. So that's basically how that shit works. Not that's that stream. There's multiple other people that make streams where they try to dog pile on other people, but that's one of the many streams that I'm actually referring to. Because the sad part about that, at the end of the day, anytime you need to gather a bunch of people to talk shit on one person, you're a bitch. At the end of the day, because the sad part about that, I never need a panel of people to talk shit on one person. Even when a person's on my panel, everybody around me gets quiet while I pretty much verbally destroy the person in the stream. Nobody else is jumping in it. Everybody just watching the fire, and just basically pulling out marshmallows so they can have a s'mores or roast a hot dog, basically. So it's one of those things where I never need the people around me to do so. They basically just get quiet and be like, it's mighty hot in here. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where if you're able to get butthurt about something that's merely some advice to you, then you shouldn't be in a game of making content in the first damn place, because that lets me know that you're emotionally weak or emotionally easily to manipulate or easily to emote, basically easily to get emote, which makes you easily manipulated or easily swayed to do stupid shit. It's simply how it works. Because now we know that you're very sensitive, and if anybody talks about you, now you're able to be manipulated into dumb shit, basically, or to do dumb shit, or get yourself into dumb shit for all intents and purposes. Is the best way I can describe that to you. So at the end of the day, once you come down to it, at the end of the day, the people aren't really watching you for your content. They're watching you for all the drama. So what you have to say means nothing. They just want to see the drama, because everybody loves drama. Everybody's infatuated with drama. This is typically why, reality TV shows are as popular as they are to these days. So at the end of the day, never be, what's up, McTown to win. Never be drug into some shit. Never be a follower. Never have a herd mentality. Never have gang mentality. Never have a cult like mentality. Never be agreeable, and never do something to appease somebody because you went out. If you have thoughts about something, you should always argue it, or you should always think it through and come up with a route out, or a parachute cord to rip, basically, so you can get out of there at any given time. Never fall for something wholeheartedly or do stupid shit for all intents and purposes. So my final thoughts on this is, if you're going to follow somebody, always be willing to question them. If their answers don't hold up to your questions, then that's a sign that you shouldn't be following that person. Or if they try to guilt you out of asking questions, or if the people around you have to guilt you out of asking questions, that person's not worth their grain of salt, basically. That person's not worth your salt and what they're trying to spew or say to you for all intents and purposes. Sorry about that. Blah. So what ends up happening is you end up with a lot of people who will believe a delusional thing. In the famous words of Freaky Jersey Tales, "You're delusional, mate. You're delusional. You're delusional, mate. You're delusional." So what ends up happening is you get caught up in this whole entire mess or clusterfuck of shit, basically, that you don't even need to be a part of. That has no base. That has no base in. That has no base, or no grounding, or nothing that grounds their beliefs or arguments that they're actually bringing up. Nothing where if you were to argue something against it, you would end up destroying the argument, or the person that can actually respond to you in a logical and or thoughtful manner for all intents and purposes. What typically happens is, if you question something they say, they typically start focusing on you emotionally. It's typically how it works. Or they'll guilt you, or they'll berate you, or they'll call you names, or they'll do stupid shit to basically make you feel inferior or less than, basically, instead of actually arguing their point. It's typically how it works. They can't argue their point, and they want to make themselves sound smart by you borrowing other people's talking points to make yourself sound smart. And that's pretty much how it works. And I've actually seen it done multiple times, especially with my talking points. I've seen it done across the board multiple times with my talking points. So I understand where the person is coming from, but I do understand that they don't have any context to the argument or the talking point. They don't have any context in or any arguments to back the talking point that they're putting forth for all intents and purposes. And I've always found it funny how they're able to do that, and able to make themselves seem as if they're smart, or make themselves seem as if they're intelligent. Or another good example of what they'll do is, before I go into my closing state, well, I'm in my closing statements, I'm in closing thoughts now, but what ends up happening with a lot of these people is, if you actually listen to them, a lot of the stuff that they say and spit, or a lot of the content that they make, ends up being filled with quotes from famous people, or lines from a book, or quotes from another author, or quotes from a philosopher, or quotes from a scholar, or quotes from somebody else. And the sad part about that, if you actually pay attention to it, what they actually have to say is very minimum, but they have everything to say about philosophers and everybody else, and all the quotes and stuff like that that they got going on around them. So typically, what they usually use a lot of quotes from random people, or other people in history, to basically actually legitimize their actual talking points. Whereas, like, I don't need a quote from a person, or quotes from multiple people, to legitimize what I got to say. I'm saying it. There is statistical fact to back it up, and there's actually scientific fact to actually back it up, and it is what it is. So it's one of those things where, like, you get into a conundrum with these people, and you start arguing, and they don't have anything to back it up, and they'll use a lot of quotes from a lot of different various peoples, and a lot of different sources, to make themselves seem smart, or make what they're saying sound reasonable. It's kind of like what I said about Lyndon B. Johnson's famous quote that they said that he actually said, when in fact he actually didn't say it. And they basically use his one quote to legitimize his following quote. The sad part about that is, the one quote that they actually used to legitimize was the actual quote that he actually says. The quote after was actually said by somebody else, or coined by somebody else on his staff, which is sad. And the sad part about that is, they basically use that quote, the legitimate quote that he's actually said and been heard saying in public, to legitimize him actually saying something. Quote the Raven, nevermore. That's a good one. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, they're willing to use any and all tactics to make it sound like they're smart or intelligent. They're willing to use any and all avenues, in any and all tactics, any and all manipulation, any and all things that they could use to get you to capitulate, and or be agreeable, and or fold under pressure. And it's sad. It's very sad. But the sad part about that is, like I said, if you go into one of these things, question their arguments, or question their talking points. If they can't argue their own talking points, then you know their talking points don't belong to them, and they're nothing more than talking points, and it's really not their talking points. Their talking points belong to somebody else, and they're merely trying to use them to sound smart. It's typically how it works. And the famous words of Edgar Allan Poe, I think it was, quote the Raven, nevermore. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like, you basically have to be able to address people properly and accordingly. Because I've actually heard from somebody who watched the Bulldog Mindset last stream, that he clusterfuck that he got himself into with other people. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, from what I heard from that whole entire thing, is he actually had more points than the people who were actually arguing against him. All the people on the stream arguing against him had less points than actually he did. So the sad part about that is, I'm more inclined to believe the pickup artist, or the PUA, over, despite the fact that I don't really agree with them. I have to give props where props is due, by saying that he actually made a lot of good points, even though they fell on deaf ears. Um, so the sad part about his arguments is, what I always say about arguments, and what other people say about arguments: never argue to your point to somebody who's not willing to listen, or somebody, or never argue arguments on to deaf ears, or somebody who's not willing to listen to your arguments, or be open to listen to your arguments, because you do nothing more than devalue your arguments. It's typically how it works, and it's true. It's very true. And the sad part about that is, if you're going to argue something, argue the point Argue to a person who's willing to listen or willing to accept your argument. Never argue to a person who's got a closed mind or narrow-minded, or to the point where like they don't listen to other insinuating circumstances to actually make it better for themselves. So the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, never sit up here trying to do something that's not for you or not right for you, or or never devalue your argument is what I meant to say by that. I kind of left that vague, that last quote vague. I mean, the last statement vague. So basically, what I mean by that is never do something that's going to fall on deaf ears, or never expend energy, unnecessary energy, if it's not going to be received positively, or if it's not going to be received at all. Never expend energy, because that's just a waste of time, effort, and energy. That's not worth your time. Now, I will say this: listening to somebody who actually watched the live stream, I would actually like to actually commend Bulldog Mindset for actually holding his own while being jumped by multiple people in that live stream. From my sources who actually watched the live stream, I would actually like to commend him for actually holding his own in that live stream. Because there's not too many people who are able to. There's not too many people who can actually stand up to people like that and actually keep it moving. So actually, have to say to him, I actually tip my hat to you, and I'm actually very proud of you, to be honest with you. Me, Tico, Tren, Red Pill is very proud of Bulldog Mindset for standing up in that stream for himself and what he believes in his convictions. That's typically how you know when a person actually believes wholeheartedly in what they're trying to preach and say and do. Because you get a bunch of motherfuckers in there that'll just get quiet or just get silent or run out of gas and just sit there and just leave. Whereas he actually had the conviction and the belief in what he was actually saying and preaching, and belief in what he was actually doing, to actually stand there and argue it. And actually tip my hat to him, and I'm actually very proud of him. I can actually say that as Tico Tren. I'm not always a cold-hearted motherfucker. I do give props where props is due at any given time to people who actually deserve it. So I do tip my hat to him. So that's pretty much my afterthoughts. And in these groups, basically, you'll basically have people of different things. You'll have the agreeable person. You'll have a person that just wants to appease everybody. You'll have the random followers. You'll have the straight ridiculous believers, and you'll have the basically leader for all intents and purposes. Typically, how it works. The sad part about that, tasks are assigned to all these people based on their fearless leader. And the sad part about that, if you argue away all their tasks and stand your own ground, you find out very quickly that what they got to say ain't shit. And they all need each other because, how they said, strength in numbers. And the sad part about that, even in that group, the strength is always not with them, depending on the people that they always get. You can always gang up on a lesser person or a weaker person, but you can't gang up on a stronger person. And it is what it is. You can't manipulate a strong person into believing stupidity when in fact they grew up on their foundation and with culture and beliefs for all intents and purposes to actually get them through their lives. But that's enough of y'all time I just took up. Y'all be blessed. Make sure y'all catch the table flipping interview with TFM on Sunday. Yeah, there'll be an interview with TFM on Sunday, on the first, that is. So definitely be around to catch that one. The video is already up for advertisement now for that day, so definitely be ready and set reminders to go check that out. Matter of fact, I'll show you the video now that I got up on there. Basically, so you can see it and want to go check it out. Basically, so you can actually know what it looks like. So definitely go check that out whenever you get a chance to. Let me go find it so I can actually give you a glimpse of what the thumbnail looks like. So basically, this is what it looks like here. So definitely check that out on Sunday. Definitely check that out on Sunday. It's going to be great. The irony to it is I actually agree with a lot of the stuff that he says. So it's not going to be. It's going to probably be. It's not even going to be a debate for the fact that that'll be the most boring debate in the whole entire world. So it's going to just be an interview because I actually agree with a lot of the stuff he says. The only thing different between me and him is I'm a bit more extreme about it. So I'm willing to do it by force. But I actually agree with a lot of the stuff he says. I also agree with a lot of stuff that Sandman says too, which is like a bit different from same path, but a bit different from what he believes. So I actually agree with a lot of stuff that Sandman says too, but at the same time, if I was going to implement it, it would be by force, excessive force. So it ends up being one of those things at the end of the day. But yeah, definitely check out that stream on Sunday. It'll be about like 7 o'clock California time, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You can pretty much sort it out in between those. So definitely check out that stream on Sunday. It'll be fun. It'll really be fun. But yeah, y'all have a blessed day. Be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk, do not but spoil yourselves. Always improve upon yourself and make yourself the better version of yourself. And always be willing to listen to arguments, even if it's an opposing argument, just for a chance that you might learn something, so you can actually strengthen your argument or make yourself a better person when it comes to your argument. Be blessed, everybody. Have a good morning. Adios. And outro.
Black bank, do diamonds on me, go flash this ain't Snapchat, cause I didn't get.
Mr. Trump, for the moment.
I'm a baby mama that do intake.